Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's session. We are unlocking value with SYSPRO and Service Geenie. Really pleased to have with me today Gary Jones and Josh Evans. They are the Service Geenie superstars. Really happy to have you with us today. Hi, guys.
Good afternoon. Nice
Hi, it's great to be here.
to join you.
And Josh is the invisible man today, so we're just having a few technical glitches, but really great to be here today. Just by way of introduction, Josh, if we can jump over to the next slide. Really quickly, my name's Darshni Shah. I'm the product manager here with NexSys, and we've got Gary Jones and Josh Evans, who are both solution architects with Service Geenie and know the product inside out. So without further ado, I'm going to switch off our cameras and hand over at this point to Gary to take you through a little bit about Service Geenie. Over to you, Gary.
Thank you very much. Considering no one can see Josh, it's a good job of turning the cameras off, I guess.
Yeah.
So the purpose of today really is to give you an introduction to Service Geenie and initially explain not only who Service Geenie are, but probably more broadly and more importantly, and hopefully with some insight, what service management software is. Because for some people, I think there's a great deal of assumption and they might think it's fairly obvious, but I think there's a great deal more to service management than people realize. So in terms of what is service management software, well, first of all, if I tell you a little bit about Service Geenie, so we are obviously a supplier of service management software and service management systems, which we've been doing for 40 plus years. Our specific version of the service management solutions are SaaS-based, so it's browser-based. In terms of the functionality of service management software, so what does it do? I think most importantly, hopefully for people that will be listening to this and watching this, is what we would term as full asset lifecycle management. So for most of our customers, well, probably all of our customers, there's some kind of asset or piece of equipment that's actually key to their business, and it's actually the management of that that's really important. So where we come in, as opposed to a piece of software like SYSPRO, is I guess you could broadly term it the kind of after sales part of the business. Now, for some of our customers, their business will exclusively be after sales, but for many of them, they'll possibly be a manufacturer or distributor or OEM, and will have some kind of after sales function that doesn't naturally sit with something like an MRP system. So typically we will be responsible for managing the asset life cycle from the after sales perspective. That will include things like a mobile engineer app, which gives you real-time updates of what engineers are doing and what assets they're looking after, what jobs, whether they're reactive or planned maintenance, which is the next point. That includes contract management. So some of our customers will do hire, but for most of them, it's from a planned or preventative maintenance perspective. And also reporting, which I know we'll touch on a bit later with Josh, which is really important. It's something that we hear a lot. And also some stuff around the real-time job scheduling. Thanks, Josh. So who's it suitable for? As we kind of just talked about, largely people that are manufacturing OEM or even service-led, but more importantly are asset-led. And that piece of equipment or that asset is quite wide and varied, both in terms of complexity, in terms of size, and in terms of just basically what it does. So people who are service-led or have a service-led part of their business, whether that be field-based or often resident-based engineering teams, and as certainly in the context of today's discussion will be SYSPRO users, and people typically that are interested in service level agreements, so having commitments either reactive or planned to be on site within a certain time period. And there can be lots of complexities around service level agreements that many people are unable to deal with, and that bleeds into compliance management. So it might be equipment or assets that need some kind of maintenance schedule on a regular basis. Thanks, Josh. I think it's really important and will really be helpful to talk about common challenges to put today's conversation in perspective. So typically the challenges that we hear when speaking to people, we hear a lot about limited visibility. So from an after sales perspective, they might have an MRP solution, they might have a great deal of control, even maybe from a financial, but actually once the asset or the equipment is in the field, they feel as though that visibility and that transparency decreases. So they're one of the common things that people talk to us about. Also around the scheduling of people that's going out to perform work. For a lot of people, that's still manual and as a consequence can be quite inefficient, particularly if you've got things like engineer skill sets where only particular people can do certain work, or as we said earlier, you've got service level agreements that mean you want people to be on time within on site within a certain time frame. Also, that the history can be quite fragmented because it can be in disparate systems. So if it's kept in a separate system and there's no integration, or it's kept in a spreadsheet, or it's kept in a kind of paper-based environment, that means that actually proving things like SLA adherence and compliance can be quite difficult, if not impossible. And also, it's quite hard to use that information to assist and plan what you do moving forward. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later to make a bit more sense. And probably the most common is the inconsistent data across business areas. From a system perspective, if people are working in silos and there's no connection between those systems, then actually people are working without a complete set of data. And again, that's something that we'll come on to in a bit. Hopefully Josh agrees with everything that I've said there.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing I'd mention is, it's probably impossible to write down all of the common challenges we kind of tend to solve for people, because there are so many. But I'd certainly say that this is quite a good subset of, the absolutely the most common ones. Yeah.
Well, I think we're going to jump across and just do we're going to look at the software again a little bit later, but I think initially we're going to do a quick overview of some of the important areas, and just so people can get a feel for the software itself. But I know in terms of common challenges, we're going to come on to that a bit later as well, because we have got a specific case study or client in mind that we've spoken to most recently that kind of lead into some of those common challenges, don't we?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So initially, we just thought we'd give you a quick look at the software, just so that you get an understanding for the look and the feel of it. Okay, so this is Service Geeni. So up the top here, straight away, we can see that it's a cloud-hosted system. Okay, and as soon as a user logs into our product, they are presented with this dashboard on the left, which is where we are right now. So hopefully this is giving you the idea that straight away, as soon as you log in, the system is presenting the types of reports and data that you might hope to see. It's really important to note that these dashboards can be controlled on a per user basis. So what the managing director sees versus the finance director versus the ops director versus the service manager will all be very different things. We provide reports such as these out of the box. Okay, you can see when you hover over different areas of pie charts, graphs, and so on, it's giving you the underlying data. While we provide that kind of initial subset, users do have the ability to kind of build their own, so it's more tailored around what exactly they want to see. Okay, and just to give you an example of how some of these reports might be quite powerful for your business, if we look at problem equipment, what this is doing is saying, of all the jobs we've done, split those jobs to show me what makes of equipment we are doing jobs against the most. So Doosan is a make of equipment. If we right click, we could say, show me of all of those jobs, split it by customer site. So what this is now doing is showing me that Asda by far are logging the most jobs against Doosan equipment. So that might empower us. It might give us the visibility to then go away and, we can drill down again, look at the jobs, look at the total spend, and maybe think about quoting them for new equipment that we're going to sell to them rather than constantly having engineers going out and repairing it. Okay, and this just informs that conversation in a much more effective way. Okay, as we scroll down, what we can see are just some different functional areas of the system. So these in effect are just shortcuts. Okay, it's just making the system as easy to use and navigate as possible. And again, different people will have different shortcuts. These are just relating to things that are naturally going to be found in this left-hand side menu. So under scheduling, for example, we've got service call, and we can also see it down there. Okay, final quick thing I just wanted to mention on this screen, guys. At the top, you've got a notification section. Again, this is really useful. Ultimately, what it's doing is it's allowing the system to feed you the information that you care about. Okay, so per different users will get different information fed to them from this notification section. But to give you some practical examples, it might be that a user has raised a purchase order for £10,000. They don't have enough purchase limit to buy that. So, you know, a user on here might do that. Alternatively, it might be that someone has raised a job with a high priority against it, and it just wants to make managers aware so that we can all make sure that we respond to that job in the most appropriate way. Also, against these notifications, you can go onto the side menu and view that notification. Okay, so it will take you into, say, the job in question. Now, from a quick overview perspective, guys, there's two other places that I'd like to go. Firstly, I think I've got it open along the top here. We've got kind of a business intelligence tab. This is just kind of keeping that same thread of conversation around visibility of data and reporting. Okay, so this is just an idea of what we can provide. You know, you've just got a very basic traffic light system here. When things are going red, we need to worry. Okay, if ever we click into a KPI, it's going to expose the underlying data so that we can see the, you know, contracts or jobs or invoices that make up that underlying data. And what a lot of businesses like the idea of is having this KPI, having this KPI section up on a flat screen TV. So everyone in the business is aware of how we're performing, aware of the areas of the business that we need to keep an eye on. Okay, and then just to finish up, the other place that I'd like us to just have a quick look at is equipment. So as Gary mentioned earlier, you know, typically a business that will be looking at Service Geeni has some concept of equipment or asset that they're going to go out and install, fix, or service. Okay, so this system has an asset register. Okay, so we can come into here and just as a quick example, say, show me all of the assets that Asda have. Okay, so now we can see in here that you've got all of Asda's equipment. Okay, it's showing you the makes, the models, the descriptions, the serial numbers, and so on. If we just quickly jump into a specific bit of equipment that we are interested in, okay, I'll just kind of give you a quick idea of some of the things against a bit of equipment that might be useful to your businesses. So within here, we've got a fork truck just as a random example. Okay, we can see the make, the model, and the serial number. We can see equipment prompts. So whenever we do a job against this asset, we always need to be aware of these things. Okay, the customer might have their own reference number, so they're going to ring us up and say it's LSU 49 that's broken down, so we can search for this asset based off the customer's own asset numbering sequence. We can track warranty. From a practical perspective, when we're logging a job, it will just let us know that, you know, this asset is under warranty if relevant. We can also have multiple different types of warranty in here, such as, you know, like an extended warranty and things like that. Okay, and lastly, we can have specification. So custom fields. Think of this as what might your engineers want to know at a glance when they are out on site. okay, because we've got a mobile app that the engineers are going to be doing their jobs through. Okay, so they'll be able to see all of this data when they are going out and doing a reactive job or a service. Okay, final two things that I just wanted to show you against the equipment. We've got this equipment history, and this is usually something that's very impactful for businesses that we speak to. Under equipment history, this is giving both your office users and your field engineers, that are in front of the asset, the job history against the asset. Okay, so for your engineers, typically this might be gold dust because it's opening their eyes to what issues has the asset had previously, which engineer worked on it, what was the fix, and also what parts did they need to use. You can have other types of history logged as well, so service contracts, parts, quotes, and so on. Okay, and the very last thing that I just wanted to show you, just in this quick overview, is right now we're talking about a fork truck that is physically on Asta's site. Okay, if I just click into here for a moment, what this is doing in here is this is allowing us to have a model template. So any fork truck that is a model, that is a 7FDF15, we can have a template for that. So it automatically adds information. Now, again, just to give you 2 or 3 really practical ways of why this is useful. First of all, we've got an upload document section here. So we can upload a manual, for example, against the equipment in just this one place. And then whenever an engineer does a job against this model, they will always have a manual. Standard service items. In some industries, this is very, very prevalent, where when we go and do, say, a major service, if we always need to swap out the spring and the fuel filter, it will add those items to the job. So it ensures that we're sending an engineer with the right stuff on their van, okay, rather than them turning up and not having the right parts. Okay, and then lastly, related items. So what this is doing is, if we just look at this line here of a fan motor, your business might have 50 different fan motors that it stocks. What this is doing is letting us know it is this particular part number that this fork truck takes. So again, when an engineer is out on site, they just instantly know which part they need to correct the problem because it's showing you the right part against the asset. Okay, so hopefully, guys, that is enough of an overview to keep you interested. What I'll do now is I'll just flick back to the presentation, and we'll be looking at the software again in just a short while. Ooh.
Thanks for that, Josh.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've been very honoured to co-present this with Darshini and Kelly, and part of the reason that we wanted to have this webinar today and impart this information was down to the fact that there is an impending integration between Service Geeni and SYSPRO, and what we wanted to do was also talk a little bit about the combined benefit. So Darcy's going to come in a moment and talk a little bit about the kind of proposed integration itself. But what I think is important is to just talk through some of the proposed benefits that come with that. And whilst they might seem fairly obvious, I think that they're worth talking through briefly. So specifically, things like the visibility and transparency. I think, as we touched on earlier when we were chatting, it's, I think, really important. It's really consistent with people that have to manage different processes and different systems, that there are many challenges that exist as a consequence of them working in silos. So I think bringing databases together in that way is really valuable. The knock-on effect of that is the consistency, so that kind of single source of truth, to coin the cliche. Again, hopefully, obviously, what it will do is reduce admin, because there aren't as many tasks required to actually make sure that that information is consistent. And we would use some automated workflows to ensure that that works optimally. And also it means that people get, not dissimilar to what you were talking about, Josh, that kind of real-time nature of the way that the data is presented.
Yeah.
And the consequence of that, it's really important, that real-time stuff, is because it allows you to take action at the point that something is happening rather than retrospectively. And also that, has an obvious knock-on effect, all of this in relation to the financial aspect of it and reducing the kind of risk of errors in that sense. Darcy, it feels like a really great time to bring you back into the conversation. Josh, if you could just flick onto the next screen for us.
Yep.
Darcy, would you be kind enough to talk us a little through this?
Fantastic, Gary. More than happy to. As Gary and Josh have alluded, we've been working closely with Service Geeni, and it's really nice to be able to co-present today's session, predominantly because we've got a number of customers that we've been working with over the years. They're really deep and strong in manufacturing distribution. However, they've added on a service arm to the business or have that particular verticalization that we've offered. And there is a need that SYSPRO natively doesn't naturally extend out. So a lot of the things that Josh has already shown around the ability to go ahead and pull in contracts, the ability to manage your assets, but also have field service engineers that you've going out and on mobile devices capturing that information. And that's where the synergy for Service Geeni comes in. And as Gary said, we've got a lot of data that we've got already in SYSPRO. We've got a lot of data in Service Geeni. We want to have the two married together and have that seamless integration at a place where the touch points make sense. With that, we've of course started down the path of a proof of concept, and it's great because we've actually been working very closely with Gary and the team for the last 12 to 18 months, understanding the technology stack and making that a little bit easier for us to be able to consume, but leveraging the power of the NexSys solution data switch in order to make the integration between the two seamless. And you can see we've started down the track of starting with the basics and then building it up. So if I take a look, we know that we're going to have the idea of stock that exists in both SYSPRO and in Service Geeni. We need to identify where the master is, where that's going to get pushed and pulled from, and that's what you're seeing here, is we're talking about some concepts around master data and where one is going to live versus the other. So at a basic glance here, we've got SYSPRO, where a new stock cut gets created, it automatically gets posted via an API into Service Geeni so that it's available automatically for the field service engineers when they're on site wanting to fix a part. You're not having to wait for someone in the back office to enter that information into another system and have it available. If we then look at something a little bit more complicated than this, and Josh, I'll get you to flip over, fantastic. The financial transactions, Gary's already alluded to this. We need to make sure that the billing and the capability of us capturing the information comes through seamlessly. You'll have a number of invoices that are already going out to your customers today. In addition to that, you want to tack on your service invoices. Service Geeni does a fantastic job of identifying whether a particular task is going to be within warranty, out of warranty, chargeable. Do we need to have additional for parts, potentially labor? All of that is within the Service Geeni engine and natively going to inherit all of the rules that Josh has already shown you set up. What we want to do is actually make sure that we're pulling the right information from Service Geeni when it's ready to invoice so that you're getting that single source of truth that Gary's alluded to and having a billing order in SYSPRO generated with all the supporting details as well. And again, that's just another proof of concept that we fleshed out and worked together with the Service Geeni team to pull into a data switch flow in addition to API calls so that it becomes a seamless flow. Now, this is our starting point. We've got many, many more flow diagrams that I can show you and bore you with, but that's not the point of today's session. It really is just around showing the fact that we put a lot of thought into this, and we're happy to work with you if Service Geeni fits the bill to figure out what that looks like and kind of move forward from there. So just a high level, there's some integration work that's already been thought through, but I'm going to hand back and actually focus on the show of today, which is really more about Service Geeni. So back to you.
Thanks, Darcy. So I think what Josh and I wanted to do at this point was really kind of take some examples of conversations that we've been having in the real world. So it's okay us hypothesizing what people want and what they need and what their problems are. But on the back of the relationship that that you spoke about, Darcy, we've also been having real world conversations with SYSPRO users who are interested in using Service Geenie in the way that we've described. And so I think it's because it might help resonate more with people who watch this. These are some of the typical, they can be quite high level, but they're really important when you get into the detail. So these are some of
Yeah.
the things that we've heard, and typically it's not uncommon for us to hear these in lots of scenarios. And we touched on some earlier. So Josh, I know that you've been having some of those conversations, and
Yeah.
this list here is specific to somebody that you've been speaking to quite recently, isn't it? So would you
Yeah.
help me elaborate a little on some of these?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as Gary has rightly identified, this list has come from a SYSPRO company that we are actually speaking with at the moment. So I just thought it would be useful to frame it around that. While these aren't unique to them as such, it's just nice to base it around a real conversation we're having at the moment. So starting off with reporting, this was actually quite an interesting one. They sent me a requirements document, and in that requirements document, it had a lot of kind of KPI style things mentioned. So it was everything from first time fix rate, mean time to repair, mean time to invoice, number of missed services. And the conversation we kind of had, I wanted to know, well, what does all of that stand at today? Because then we can think about how is Service Genie going to improve them for you. And actually, it was really interesting because they didn't know what all of those KPIs and stats were today. They've got no way of knowing or measuring them, so they don't know what the baseline is for the business.
So
So
just so they don't feel bad if they're watching, that's really typical, isn't it? That's very common. Um,
yeah,
and I think
absolutely. This is it.
the kind of knock-on effect of that is, and it sounds obvious, but what people really want is they want to be able to see the data, trust the data, and take action, knowing that the data is accurate. And I think that's the
Yeah,
consistency, isn't it? With this example, is what we hear a lot is I get some reporting, I get some data from it, but I don't trust it enough to actually take
yeah,
any action to correct what
action.
it's telling me.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So certainly, hopefully from the just the initial look at Service Genie, the dashboard we highlighted would be an excellent way to address some of those reporting concerns.
Yeah, we're going to have a look at that in a
Naturally,
second, aren't we?
yeah, we'll flick back onto the product in just a moment, and we'll kind of address some of these from there. First time fix rate as well was one. This was one of the specific KPIs that they had in mind. But with that, they were absolutely adamant that this one would probably, be one of the most important ones to track. And right now, I think there was a general consensus that the engineers aren't empowered enough to put the business in a position to start increasing the first time fix rate. So they felt like engineers didn't have basic details that would really help them in their day to day. So things like the asset history, what problems has that machine had in the past, because that might inform how are we going to resolve the issue that it's got today. It's that background information about the asset that the business, as many businesses do, were lacking.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Moving on to visibility. So this is probably the most common one, I might say. So visibility of field-based jobs and engineers. So it is just that idea around, in so many businesses now, engineers will essentially still be using paper. And when jobs are kind of allocated out to them, the office doesn't really know what's going on with it until, either the engineer hasn't shown up and the customer's angry, or the engineer comes back and, sort of says, yeah, everything's fine. It just kind of all goes into a bit of a black hole. So what Service Genie is trying to do is increase the visibility of the life cycle of a job. So, you can see, for example, that your engineer's on the way, that your engineer's on site, that your
Yeah.
engineer's just finished up.
And I
And
think, sorry, Josh, I was going to say, I think in this
no,
example
no,
as well, it's about, to give that visibility again a bit more context, it's in that example, people wondering whether do they need more engineers, or can their engineering team operate more efficiently to do the work that they have? So it's kind of, well, we're not doing everything that we should do or would like to do. So actually, is it because we're not scheduling efficiently enough and the engineering team can do more, or is it that we need more engineers? And of course that's a pretty expensive resource, and quite difficult to come by these days. So it's really important that people are able to have that visibility and not sat in the office wondering, which is kind of the scenario we're in now, isn't it?
yeah, that's absolutely right. And certainly one thing you said there is something that I hear in almost every demonstration, which is that good engineers are hard to come by. So, it almost segues, I suppose, into the final point quite nicely as well, around kind of compliance and effective scheduling of works. If we address the compliance bit initially, this compliance can take many different avenues, I suppose. It might be a statutory compliance, so as to say that this machine needs to be, serviced once a year legally, or it might just be you guys complying with an SLA, or a response time that you've agreed with your customer on a contract. You
Yeah.
need to have the tools to kind of allow you to adhere to that. It might even be as simple as an engineer needing to do a sort of health and safety type inspection when they arrive on site. Again, that's kind of another angle that compliance can
Yeah.
take.
And in terms of the scheduling as well, in this example again, it's partly due to capacity, isn't it? We're missing services that causes a raft of other issues. So how do we plan more effectively? How do we ensure that we do a greater percentage of them at the right time? And I
Yeah,
think again, all those things that they're all linked, aren't they? Because even that issue, the scheduling of the plan maintenance goes back to the transparency and the actionable insights. It's, can I see what's coming up? Can I plan effectively for it? Can I see if there's a gap? What do I do about that gap? Can I trust what
yeah,
I'm being told by the data that I have? It's all linked, isn't it? They're all issues that create knock-on issues.
yeah, yeah.
And I
You're
think
absolutely right, and it's how things snowball.
and I think you guys have actually encapsulated one piece beautifully, which is also at the end of the day, customer experience. And by making sure that you've got this expensive resource at the right place at the right time, and you add the agility of getting them to a place when there is unplanned or
Yeah,
potentially some challenges, that
Yeah,
in itself is incredibly powerful.
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. You're
yeah,
absolutely
exactly
spot
right.
on. Yeah.
So I think at this point, what we were going to do
So,
is jump in and have another quick look at a bit of the software, and try
yeah,
and see
yeah.
if we can, in this little kind of 5 or 10 minutes, Josh, is relate some of that conversation we've had about that specific example and how we might be able to help with what we have with Service Genie.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So kind of continuing on from that last point around effective planning of, planned maintenance works. We've already spoken about the fact that the system has the concept of a customer within it. So with that, a customer and equipment rather, with that in mind, what you can do is add their equipment onto a service contract, so as to say, we're going to be servicing this asset at whatever frequency. It might be monthly, quarterly, annually, and so on. Now, I can't really show you that in enough detail today. That's perhaps a separate session, but the output of that is this screen that we're on right now. Okay, and what this screen is ultimately doing is it's giving users the ability to see what services do we have coming up. Okay, so there's some useful toggles here. Show me what's overdue, due within a week, due within a month, and so on. It's showing you a customer account here, And if we expand that, it's then breaking it down into these are 3 bits of equipment that this customer has that require a service. Okay, you can also see things like service dates on it and so on if you look through the columns. What most businesses tend to do though is, while these buttons are very useful from a quick overview perspective, what most businesses tend to do is just build a quick filter in here. So you can say new service date is before, and then, you know, this would be on whatever frequency you do, the end of next month. Okay, so what the system can then do is go and find all of those customers that have a service before the end of next month, display them in this screen for you. Okay, and then you could select all and raise jobs for selected services. Okay, what it will do is it will raise the job. It will let you know on the job the target date, which is, you know, when the service is technically due. It will add the equipment to the job. Also, really importantly, it will add any relevant inspections. So any type of service check sheet that you might do on, say, an annual service, that would also get added. Okay. The final thing that it will do as well is it can add service items. Now, we spoke about those very, very briefly when we were looking at the equipment record. That was to say, on a minor service, you know, we need to swap out the filter. So what it can do is it can add that filter onto the job, and it can also show you here how many filters you need for, say, the next month's worth of servicing. So it will highlight to you your stock is short potentially. Okay, and so we've spoken in this screen about the system raising jobs for us based off it being a pre-planned service. Okay, what I would kind of propose we do now is kind of take the other side of that and actually look at a reactive scenario. Okay, so in order to do that, what we'll do is just under scheduling, we'll just jump into service call. And essentially, you know, to give you a very real world example, right now we've picked up the phone to a customer who said, my machine isn't working. Okay, from this screen, it's designed to be very, very quick to build a job and get something out to an engineer. Okay, so you're going to know who the customer is, where they're calling from, or what equipment, you know, it's related to. So if I in here just put as the crew, you can see it's found that straight away. Now, it's completely possible that your customer might not know which specific bit of equipment it is that's broken. That's fine. You could just raise a job here and raise it against the site with a view that the engineer is going to add the equipment to the job when they're out on site. Okay, but just to run this example through, what we'll do is imagine that we've got a really good customer who knows some information about the equipment. Okay, so we can see as the superstores, as the crew, this is their asset, and now we're just going to add a job against this asset. When we're raising the job, we get a site level prompt. So anytime we do work at this specific site, you know, the parking's at the back of the building, there's a service entrance we need to use. The second line here, this is information around the asset. Okay, so it's just making sure that, you know, we're responding appropriately to both the site and the asset. Okay, so it's filled out quite a lot of the job for us based off, you know, knowing the site and the asset. Okay, if we just jump into here, we can add a caller. So who have we spoken to today? You can see it's pulled through on the right, or a priority rather. So it's letting us know we have got a 24-hour response time agreed with this client. Okay, so it will in effect start the clock running, counting down from that. So we can see Darshni rightly kind of pointed out that Service Geeni does, you know, quite an effective job of letting users know, you know, is this chargeable, is it under warranty, and so on. So it's picked up here that the asset is under warranty. Now, oh, apologies. It's picked up here that the asset is under warranty. So with that in mind, it will look to build kind of a warranty charge code against it. That can be changed later on if required. Down the bottom here then, we've also got our our kind of work instruction to the engineer. So in here, this is where you would say asset won't switch on. So that's the problem that's been reported. Okay, we can also add estimated hours. That will be useful for when it comes to us planning this job out. It will look to block out 1 hour against the job. The office could add additional things such as forms, if there's a particular date that they want us to try and come on, etc. Okay, but from here, the other thing that a lot of users do is if we just look at add equipment task, what it's also doing in here is you see how it's saying services, it's letting us know the service dates of the equipment on the site. Basically, it's empowering the office user to go, oh, well, you know, if we're sending someone out today and your equipment's due for a service next week, why don't we just do it all today? It's trying to give them that visibility. Okay, so it's, you know, reducing the amount of times you're having to go out to site. If we just raise this as a job, it's letting me know that there's a bunch of open jobs against this asset. In reality, we might add what we're doing today to one of those job numbers, but you know, just for demo purposes, I'll create a new job. When I've created the new job, what it's essentially going to do is load me into the scheduler. Okay, so it's telling us the job number that's been raised. Okay, and we can now see that's the job up there, 1941. Okay, we can now see our engineers' diaries. On this list, I can filter this list of jobs to say, will only show me, say, the unissued jobs. Okay, you know, those are the jobs that haven't yet been sent out to an engineer. We haven't penciled in any time. To get this job allocated out, it is just a drag and drop process. Okay, just before we do that though, I will just highlight a couple of useful features on this screen that people tend to like. So it's worth me saying that wherever you see this pop-out button here and up here, you can have the diary open across, say, 2 screens. You know, one screen is a list of jobs, one screen is just your engineers. Okay, just to make better use of it. Also, if we select all of our unissued jobs, okay, we also have the ability to show those jobs on a map. So we get an understanding of where is all our work. Also as well, with that in mind, we also have the ability to show engineers on a map. This is just giving you the understanding of, I've got an engineer here, okay, and I've got a job here that needs an engineer. So, you know, very simply, I'm going to assign these jobs to Josh Evans. Okay. Alternatively, what a number of businesses do like to do is they like to search it via postcode as well. Okay, so you do have the facility within the product to type in a postcode and have it show you the nearest engineer to a particular postcode if you would work that way. On the planner board, looking down here then, we can look at it on a daily view, weekly view, monthly view. We can also cycle through, you know, different dates in the past, in the future, and we can also kind of zoom out to make the time slots wider or zoom in to make them more specific. Okay, if we go ahead and drag and drop that job into a time slot for an engineer, okay, so you can see it's appearing there. We could send it out to multiple engineers. If I hover over it, it's giving me more visibility about what that job actually is. It's telling me it's scheduled. Essentially, what I can do from here is click on the job and issue it. The difference between scheduled and issued, scheduled, we've just penciled it in. Issued is it has physically now gone, you know, from the planner onto the engineer's mobile device. So the engineer will get a push notification letting them know that they have got a new job to crack on with. Okay. So on that note, what we'll do just to kind of finish up this quick overview is just spend 1 or 2 minutes on the mobile device, if that's okay.
Before you jump over, Josh, I think it's all right. It's just worth highlighting. I think in relation to some of the real world problems we spoke about earlier, when you talk, we spoke a lot about effective scheduling, particularly of reactive and planned work, and we talked about visibility as well. And I think, that highlights really well how the system can have a real world effect on those issues, because what we're saying here is we've got all of the jobs and all of the information related to those jobs. We know where the engineers are, we know what they're doing, we know what work needs doing, we know where geographically each of them correlate to one another, and we've got an ICT planner at the bottom to do that. So there's some of the ways in which, I know we've only got limited time today, but that's some of the ways that we address some of those common issues.
Yeah, completely right. One thing to mention on that, and again, maybe today isn't the right forum for it, but just so that people have an awareness, we are also going to be releasing an AI route optimizer fairly soon. The idea of this, just from an absolute top level, is, if you've got 5 jobs to do tomorrow for a certain engineer, it will take into account where the jobs are and kind of prescribe a route for that engineer to follow. So it's, planning it in the most efficient way. But hopefully we'll have a demo of that at some point in the near future to show people. Okay, just to finish up, this is the Engineer mobile app. Okay, straight away you can see it's very different to what the office users have. That's very deliberate. It's very much based around, making an engineer's life as easy as possible. Okay, so it's very much based around them completing jobs. Okay, we can see what's pending today. So these are the jobs that I need to do today. Okay, with this, we can see, on this kind of front tile, who the customer is, what the equipment is, what the problem is. I've got very quick action buttons down the bottom here to make my life as easy as physically possible. Okay, that's going to show me, sorry, this is the screencast, it won't load it, but that's going to show me where the job physically is, so the engineer, can be guided there via Google Maps. This next button will mark me as on my way to the job. Okay, so you can see I've gone in, it's marked me now as traveling to the job. Okay, we'll be guided by Google Maps. Okay, and then when we arrive on site, we're just going to hit start task. Okay, with this, if your engineers need to do a health and safety check as soon as they arrive, this is what it's loaded me into now. So your engineer would fill this out. Just for time and demo purposes, I'm going to mark it as not required. It's just a little cheat I've got to get around that. Now that
Again,
I'm on site,
sorry, Josh, just very quickly again,
no,
just important to point out that as you're changing on the device what you're doing as an engineer, the people in the office have visibility of that. So again, going back to that transparency perspective and point of view, they're seeing where you're up to and seeing where the engineers are, what they're doing, and what progress they're making, aren't they?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So it's keeping everyone in the loop about this job. So as an engineer, I can be reminded, who's the customer? Are there any site notes I need to be aware of? Are there any site documents I need to be aware of? What was the problem? Okay, roughly how long should it take under estimated hours? Okay. Once I've got awareness of that, I can now move on to the asset itself. So this is all of the information about the fork truck. Okay. Under actions, I can see things like, the parts history, the job history. I could add new equipment. If we've got a typical cheeky customer that says, while you're here, can you also look at this one? I could add a new asset onto this job. Okay. Under forms. So against forms, these are custom check sheets that we've come up with. Particularly relevant if it was, say, a service, the job would have a service check sheet on. Okay, within here, just to give you an example, within here, this is how one might look. Okay, now the not required, that is what I've got on purely for demonstration purposes. If it was mandatory that they do it, that box wouldn't be there. But you can see here, pre-job photo, they would have to take a photo to answer this question. There is no other way to get past that. They have to take a photo. There's, radio buttons, tick boxes, condition of equipment being 1 to 10. so they can only enter a number, and so on. Okay, it can even have, a free notes box, signatures box, and so on. Okay, so this is something I built myself. So if I can do it, honestly, absolutely anyone can. Okay, but yeah, the idea here is it's custom questions that we're asking our engineer to
Yeah,
fill out.
it's an important differentiation that to clarify is these forms are individual and configured by our customers, aren't they? So what
Yeah,
they want to capture is what they dictate, not what we dictate, which I think is important because again, it's common feedback that we got and we get quite regularly is that the systems they're using are quite restrictive in that element, and actually the configurability of what we've just discussed is really valuable because those sheets are changing quite often.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, people have the ability to go in, edit them themselves, particularly for things like any sort of regulatory compliance. They have the power to do it themselves. Lastly, under work done, so this is where the engineer is going to fill out, what have they done today. We can make certain questions on this mandatory. So root cause. I've got a different customer that I'm speaking with at the moment that's particularly interested in root cause analysis. So they're forcing their engineers to enter what the root cause is of every job. So that way it's going to feed into reports so that they can see against this model of equipment, 70% of the time it's an electrical fault, just as an example.
Again, that provides an actionable insight, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So first time fix, was it customer damage? There's various other questions there. You can see under labor that it's accruing time on the job, so we know how much to bill our customers for. Okay, obviously you might have like minimum charges and things like that. The system can cope with all of that. It's just letting you know how long your engineer was actually on site. You've got the ability as well to put parts on here as well. I'm just being conscious of the amount of time I'm taking, so I will wrap up very soon. But in here, your engineer can add, van stock, let's just say, so they can see what parts they've got in their van. And also as well, they can see what they've got at the branch. Now that's particularly useful. If your engineer doesn't have it in the van, you might not want the engineer to go and pick it up from a supplier. So the engineer can check, what have I got in branch? Right, I've got it in the branch. I'm going to go to the branch and then come back with it, and the issue will be resolved today within the SLA that we've agreed. Okay, you can obviously search for parts based off part numbers. You can scan them as well based off barcodes. Lastly, we've just got work done notes. So your engineer can come into here and enter what they've done today. They can add additional photos. They can annotate the photos. And lastly, we can have pre-built work reports for the engineer. So it's just going to take that text and fill all of that out for them. Okay, so from here, we would just take a customer signature and that would be the job completed. And that would then be reflected in the back office, within a matter of a minute or so, that job is now completed. So now the back office can crack on and check the job over and get the invoice out the door very, very quickly.
Perfect. Thank
Okay,
you for that, Josh.
so yeah, sorry, very difficult to do a quick overview, guys, when it can do so much, but hopefully that's been of use. So I'll just flick back onto this.
Great. Thanks for that. I completely appreciate what you're saying. It's there are lots of things that we can talk through. I think that was a really good kind of high level overview, which hopefully people that watch this, it will give them food for thought. I think if we move from the real world problems into the outcomes, then hopefully we've kind of talked through and demonstrated these elements, but we probably kind of labored the point around increased confidence and decision making. That's back to that, trusting the data that you have and being able to make decisions on the back of it with confidence. I think we could see how the admin burden would be significantly reduced, both through the integration with SYSPRO and through the way that the Service Geenie solution works. We talked about the compliance element of it and being able to plan better, particularly around maintenance and being able to see the capacity that you have to fulfill that. And I think one of the things that we all talk about, these various common issues and problems that people have, but ultimately the more efficiently that you're working, the better customer service you're giving, because you are being there on time. You're not doing unnecessary repeat visits, and the experience that they have of you as a service provider is much improved. So there are lots of real positive outcomes from that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And of course, the more effective scheduling, which I was going to jump in again, but I thought I jumped in enough, was around kind of the cost base. So, not only are you giving and delivering a better service, but you're reducing your cost as well. So, by definition, increasing your margin, which I'm sure everybody wants to do.
Yeah.
Thanks, Josh.
Absolutely.
If you just move on to the last slide, because we're getting towards the end of our session today. But hopefully, and certainly for me, the key takeaways today have been around the integration with SYSPRO and the conversation we had around that. And again, we've talked a lot about how much control that gives you, specifically from the Service Geenie perspective of increased, better control of the service or after sales operations. Included in that, better data, faster responses, that reduction in admin burden, which has an impact on both cost and margin, and that it's ideal for people that have that kind of need. So it can be a service organization, it could be an OEM, a distributor, or very commonly a manufacturer who have some kind of service or after sales function, which often gets missed in those scenarios and is often the poor relation. But can
Yeah,
be
that
but can
is what
be
I
a
always say.
yeah it can be a real drain on both. So you created something fantastic that you're issuing to the customer, but if their experience from that point onwards is poor, then it doesn't matter how good you are, that reflects poorly. So it has many benefits, and I don't
Yeah.
think, hopefully, Josh, that I've missed anything off there that you want to chime in on.
No, I think you've done a really good job of summarizing the key takeaways. To be fair, yeah, it kind of encapsulates hopefully what we've tried to deliver today.